There's a totally awesome new Hulk in town. Well, there was 3 years ago. They've probably brought Bruce back to life by now.
Welcome to Panelism, the podcast where we talk about the comics and graphic novels worth having on your shelf. I'm Taylor Trask.
And I'm Todd A.
And we are back with another book review episode. I say that because we'd kind of gotten off the beaten path for a little while. I mean,
I feel like we're back
on the path for weeks, so it's not like this is new, but it's just like, oh, yay, we're back to books. We're back to books stuff.
This is actually one, and I mean, I know we're going to chit-chat a little bit, but I had that pleasant experience of reading a comic without thinking of it for the show in mind, Okay. So, yeah, I definitely feel like we're back in that spirit of, because we had all the Game of Thrones season, and we did special episodes on Endgame and summer movies and stuff like that, and it became that thing of like doing a book episode was like an assignment. This week I felt like, we don't actually have an assignment, and we were sort of trying to schedule out the show, and you have put in some long hours and weren't really up to talking about a book, and I was like, I just read a book for fun last week. Let's talk about that. So, I like
how I
like
had
that
been
experience.
going. It was all books of pleasure, and not like, here's my assignment. I mean, not that those are bad too. I mean, it's kind of fun to give yourself a deadline. This isn't all just. Usually, folks, this isn't just by the seat of our pants. We try to have a plan and all that.
And we do try to have a plan. We also want when we do have an assignment, it's because we want to talk about a book that we think is special in some way. Exactly. So even if it's an assignment, it's not like, I mean, we don't get like publicist emails or anything asking us to talk about stuff. God knows we pull stuff from years and years ago. It's totally up to us. And so that's, but it is always fun when it's just like, there's no intellectual reason for me to talk about this. It's just a fun book. Although maybe I do too many fun books. I'll have to look into that.
There are some really good fun books. I keep going back to I'm an Albion and you're an Alabin or whatever.
Oh my God.
That book is. That was such a fun pick. That was such a fun, heartwarming pick for the whole family.
I got to tell you, I last week traveled to see my whole family. But my niece and nephew specifically were there, and my niece read bits of that to my nephew, and it was the most adorable thing you've ever seen. So,
well, I last week traveled to see the end of the X-Men experience as we know it, and sat through the Dark Phoenix movie. And my first impressions to you were that I was rather, keen on it, I guess you could say. I was like, it's not so bad. It's all right.
Yeah.
And then within about 24 hours, I recanted that and basically said, it is a tire fire. It is a very beautiful looking tire fire, but still a tire fire. And I stand by that. The more I've thought about it since, I'm like, and it's more, it's less, it's just another sort of subpar X-Men movie, more like this is the last go around. And the second go around on this storyline from goddamn whatever his name is, Simon Kirkman.
Oh yeah, I can't remember.
That dude. Who was a co-writer or co-producer on The Last Stand. So it's like I thought, this is going to be what he wanted it to be the whole time.
Yeah.
Maybe there were elements of that, but the more I thought of it, I'm like, man, it was like he couldn't decide if he wanted to do the movie Carrie or a good last X-Men movie, and he decided to just sort of do a highly mediocre version of both.
Well, now, did he write and direct this one?
I believe he wrote it and he directed it.
Oh, okay.
Dark Phoenix. I mean, I'm not going to do a full review, but a couple just stray thoughts. One, you don't put the killing of a major character in the goddamn trailer. So that was like lost all its punch. It was a weird death anyway, where I was like, wait, what?
What? Now, which one are you talking about?
I mean, I guess kind of spoilers, but not really, because they put it in the trailer. No, freaking Raven Mystique dies. She gets axed like right out of the gate, and you're like, oh, right. I mean, not right out of the gate, but very soon. And it's like it was funny because Jennifer Lawrence. Remember on the first X-Men movie, she's like mutant and proud, and then it's like she's always in her blue form. Now it's like any excuse she has to be Jennifer Lawrence and not blue, they're looking for it. Like she'll just walk into the mansion and just change into a beautiful white woman. You're like, okay. And then it's like the makeup they give her is just her head. I think she might even be wearing gloves, just her head because she's wearing the X suit. And it's like the lightest blue paint of all time. And you're just like, did they just, I mean, was it 30 minutes in the chair today? Like what's going on? So it's clear she was just like, get me out of these things. She's far from where she entered them.
I wonder if her contract was like, I'll do one more movie, but I will only put on 15% of the makeup.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it felt like it was that kind of a decision. Like, how can we cover her up so we can only do her head? Like, what should we do? It's also weird. It just betrayed so much that they wonderfully set up in First Class, which, by the way, Matthew Vaughn movie, I should just know now, moving forward, that Matthew Vaughn, anytime he touches anything, it's going to be grand. A couple other stray thoughts, though. One, for the first time ever, and inexplicably, the soundtrack was not Jeff Ottman, who had done, sort of that marquee, that dun 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 dun, like that. That's that guy. Is it Jeff Ottman? Michael Ottman? Ottman X-Men.
I don't know.
He the X2 soundtrack and then that theme. And they brought him back for Days of Future Past and I think Apocalypse. But no, instead of him or any other composer that you think would be appropriate for this, John Ottman. They brought in freaking Hans Zimmer. So you have this like Dark Knight Returns sound, the Batman Begins soundtrack, which is very sort of visceral and there's no hummable melody of any kind. And you're like, right, okay, well this is a weird choice for this late in the season. So that was odd. And then it's very, very clear to me. I freaking love James McAvoy. I was gonna say Matthew McConaughey. James McAvoy as an actor, he's just not a good Professor Xavier at all. Like just the more he's on screen and the longer he's been in the role, I'm just like, man, I didn't like. Do you think
was that a tough decision to come to? Did you try to give him a lot of credit for it?
Oh, completely. I started noticing though in Age of Apocalypse, where I'm like, I don't know if you're the best Professor X. Like he sort of crushed it in Days of Future Past. I appreciated him then, but the closer he's gotten to having to be, a version of Patrick Stewart. Yeah, like I mean, I'm not looking for an impression of Patrick Stewart, but like I want more of that kind of integrity and sort of class and sophistication. And man, he's kind of a showboaty Trump-like character in this last movie. It's really weird. Really, really weird. Like Magneto is more Professor X than McAvoy is. And it made me think, the First Class started as a Matthew Vaughn movie. How awesome would it have been if they could have found a way to get freaking Mark Strong in as Professor X instead? Because I'm watching it now going, shit, he's who I want. I want his chemistry off of Fassbender. So that was weird. And then finally, it's just, they could have done all the fun things they ever wanted to do. Put Magneto in any kind of costumes. I mean, they didn't even give him gray hair or white hair. It's just like Fassbender literally as he is in real life, just playing himself more or less. And I was like, really? Like he's supposed to be 60 here, I would gather. Like why?
Oh, really?
I mean, this is 92 and he was 12 during World War II. So he's probably, late 50s, early 60s. And just like they didn't bother at all to put any sort of production into the makeup or any of that. I'm just like, oh God.
So he also had that in his contract.
I mean, must have.
I refuse to do more than 15 minutes of makeup before.
What really got me thinking was that the whole cast none of them wanted to be there. I don't think I've ever seen a more lethargic movie. And I think I was bamboozled because it's shot beautifully. Like it looks really good. But just none of that cast has any interest. I mean, freaking what's her face? Jessica Chastain. I have never seen her more bored or uninterested in anything in my life. Yeah.
This is hard to hear because, as I told you when we were texting about this, Sophie Turner's been such a delight on the press tour. And so it's, I really wanted it to be good sort of for her sake. I was like, you're so great on talk shows. I hope this movie rules and you're, a movie star now. not just a Game of Thrones star.
It's worth noting, by the way, even on the main poster, like the cast poster, Jennifer Lawrence is just Jennifer Lawrence, no blue makeup. She's just standing there. It's like there's this beautiful blonde woman just like in the middle of the X-Men. You're like, who's that? Like, is that like Emma Frost? No.
And it's just like a selfie that she emailed to the producer when they were like, we got to do a poster.
They just put the costume on her. Like, here you go. Look at Fassbender. I'm gonna send this to you. Like, go to Wikipedia and look at the poster. Like, Fassbender's making a face like he just ate a bad taco. James McAvoy looks like he's in a different movie entirely. I don't here. Let me send.
No, I think this is I think I've been seeing this in bus stops.
Wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I think back to those terrible posters of First Class where it was the really shitty silhouettes and then like the weirdly cropped, like glowy faces appearing in those silhouettes. Like that was a real campaign. And everybody's like, who's designing these things now? Like what? Yeah. What's going on? Anyway.
Yeah, I know. With off topic to some degree, but not that far off topic. I don't know what I was going to say with way there.
Let me ask you this real quick.
Yeah.
How long do you think before they try to reboot this under the Disney MCU?
A Marvel banner. I don't know. I wonder if it just becomes TV shows or something. Is Legion still around?
Yeah, and actually just kicked off its fourth season.
Oh, wow. I don't know. Maybe they go that way,
That seems like it's probably, if you're going to do these kind of very character driven pieces, you can't, there's only so many times you can show Magneto floating over a bunch of stuff while he crushes other stuff. That's like, they just need these set pieces in these movies. I'm like, this could have been like Ex Machina if you really wanted it to be.
Well, and what would be awesome, and we've gotten moments of it in other X-Men movies, are those team ups of unexpected, because the X-Men have this great history of like kind of hating each other, or there's all this rivalry and bullying because these characters have been bullied as children, and that's how they get it out. And there are always these great team ups, whether it's like Wolverine and Rogue, which was granted like a very affectionate team up, or Magneto and Professor X, or something. Like they could just make movies like that all for the rest of time, just like pick 2 or 3 sort of weirdo long shot buddies and put them in an action movie together.
Wolverine, Professor X, and Logan was that relationship was really well fleshed out. I was thinking back though, I'm like, if they wanted to do another Dark Phoenix movie, what they probably should have done just to completely subvert expectations, because it's like, look, this was made when the negotiations, the Disney Fox negotiations were well underway. It probably got little to no attention from either side of that equation. It's like, okay, well, let's just do something really interesting and arty and cool. They could have made a movie as small, a Dark Phoenix movie as small as Ex Machina, and instead of bringing in this weird Jessica Chastain character who has no basis in anything most people know, it's just some random alien they cooked up for literally no reason, like nothing changed. I mean, she didn't influence the story hardly at all. Why don't you actually cast like Bryan Cranston as Mr. Sinister? And have him like get a hold of Jean after the spaceship thing happens, and he's like holding her in like this pen, and he gets to sort of reverse Silence of the Lambs, or a reverse Hannibal Lecter, and basically like try to bring out, psychotherapy, bring this out of her, and then that's the whole crux of the movie is him. And then you get a little of that in this because Jessica Chastain tries to do that, but it's not the character study it could or should be of this poor girl who's been sort of everybody's victim.
Yeah. Weird. Well, as I was going to say, that was not a total diversion, because I am talking about a Marvel book today.
Yeah.
One that is much more fun than it sounds like Dark Phoenix was.
I hope so.
I'm sure I will end up seeing Dark Phoenix at some point, and maybe we can talk about it more in depth there. I did just Google the release date of New Mutants because I was like, where the hell is that movie? Never. I know we've talked about this. So, and even when you Google it, there's like Google returns 2 different results. It says August 2nd, 2019, as it is quoting a story saying it's April 2020. It's like, no one even knows.
You've got me.
But yeah, so as I was traveling last week, and looking at the Kindle app on my iPad, realized at some point, and this must have been a freebie that I totally forgot about, But it may have been that big Marvel sale. I don't know, but I don't have it in my Comixology library. I just have the Totally Awesome Hulk Volume 1 as a Kindle comic. And I was on this airplane and went, yeah, that's totally what I want to read. I had picked up 1 or 2 issues of this when it was, it's hard to say rebooted. It wasn't like a reboot of Hulk. It was just a new Hulk title in 2015 or 16. I think the full volume was published in 2016. So I'm not sure if, the number 1 issue debuted the year before or whatever. But the whole idea, and if you go back to our A-Force episode, you'll hear me confused about this as well. I guess there's this battle world thing that happens. That's like the Secret Wars deal or something that happened in 2016. And so this
battle world, you're not talking about like a Planet Hulk offshoot storyline, are you?
Not a Planet Hulk, but it was like one of the Marvel event books, either Civil War II or Secret Wars. Who knows? I'm sure someone knows, but I think it was Secret Wars. They went to Battle World. So this sort of picks up on that, sort of like A-Force made these allusions to like things that had happened on Battle World.
Is this a book? Well, let's just define that right there. Is this a book that you do lose a little of because you don't know all that continuity?
I was going to say, I didn't even realize it was a Battle World book, or that Battle World took place before it. Until I was putting together my notes for this episode and read the back cover from Amazon, because I was able to jump in and immediately get it. And it gave me just enough sort of hook into a backstory and this new Hulk's relationship with Bruce Banner. So the new Hulk is this teenager named Amadeus Cho. And he has a sidekick of his sister, who has no superpowers, except she's also a genius. Of course, we know Amadeus is a genius because he tells us all the time that he's a genius. And from living in America the last 3 years, we know that that's totally what geniuses do, is they just tell you they're a genius all the time.
I am a genius. But he's a teenager. That's new to me, because I always kind of pegged him as like mid to late 20s or something like that. So. Yeah.
So teenager. So he's kind of a very unstable genius.
He's like one of those Saved by the Bell teenagers that look like they had some sort of growth hormone entered into them at age 9.
I will... What I'm going to talk about today that's different is I'm only going to really review issues 1 through 4.
Okay.
And we'll talk about the other issues. But that's what I want to, that's the story I'll talk about.
But that's not like trade paperback number 3.
No, it is a trade paper.
It is.
I have the, digital version of the trade paperback, volume 1.
Volume 1. Okay.
So there are 6 or 7 issues in this. I think there's 7. And yeah, I just want to talk about 1 through 4, but those were all written by Greg Pak and illustrated by Frank Cho. This is a Marvel comic book published 2016. Here's the back cover. There's a brand new Hulk in town, and his name is Amadeus Cho! ! Get ready for gamma fueled entertainment as the kid genius decides he's going to be the best Hulk ever and just possibly brings the entire world crashing down into chaos! Cho is taking on the biggest monsters in the Marvel Universe, but can he handle the danger posed by Lady Hellbender? What will She-Hulk and Spider-Man make of this very different Green Goliath? And what exactly happened to Bruce Banner? With monster mayhem in the mighty Marvel manor, all from the wild and crazy minds of Planet Hulk writer Greg Pak and superstar artist Frank Cho, this is better than incredible. It's totally awesome. Plus,
did Ted Theodore Rogan write this back of the book?
Probably.
They're totally awesome.
I am realizing that how useless the back of the book for Marvel books is, because I've read them now for several, and it's like in the second sentence of reading it, I go, man, this is so stupid. It doesn't tell you anything about it.
I think about your Domino book. I think that was a pretty like, wait, what? By the way, I also want to see a movie probably never going to be a movie, maybe, but at least a book where Lady Hellbender and Lady Deathstrike unite together to fight Lady J from the G.I. Joe universe.
Now, is Lady Hellbender a known quantity to you?
Not at all. First time I ever heard it. That's why I looked it up. I'm like, how many Lady something or another are there in this whole thing?
Well, yeah. Same. I was going to say, so it definitely sort of throws you into the middle of it without an origin story, which is great. That is awesome. I don't know how.
Amadeus Cho just is Hulk.
Yeah. Its first scene is like there's on a beach and something is rising out of the water that is sort of monster shape and size. And his sister, Madame Curie Cho, or Maddie, is like talking to him through this robot, which looks like a keg of beer, and they call Kegger. And it's just sort of a floating robot presence so that she can be near the battle and observe it, but safe in her van. Is there
any kind of like van? I'm assuming. I mean, is it clear? Is he Chinese, Japanese, Korean? Like, what is his origin?
They don't. It's not called out, you know.
Well, I asked because if I didn't know if there was some sort of subtle like kind of play at manga. If he was Japanese and she's like, you know, they kind of make everything sort of arch and animated. If you know she's talking to him through this robot or something, or is that did they not stylistically try to do that for any reason?
I don't. A quick Google search tells me that he is a Korean American.
Okay,
but
so it's not.
It is not. Yeah, they're not playing with that. I mean, I think this is more Reed Richards kind of stuff of like there's a little, robot. So she literally like sits in a van that's full of computers, and food. I believe maybe they have a food truck.
The reason I ask is just because I just finished Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse at your recommendation.
Holy
and there is that
crap. Yeah.
there is that sort of manga derived character.
Yes.
And I'm like, ooh, maybe this is kind of like another sort of shout out, maybe a subtler version of that. But you're saying no, that doesn't.
No. And especially the way it's drawn by Frank Cho is like, this is just the fun cartoon, like Hulk. Like this is just comic book Hulk, you know?
Got it.
Yeah. And that's kind of like, I don't know, like that to me was enough. You know, I didn't, I like when Hulk stories play with the darkness and the light, and the way they do it in this one is, and I would say go back to the Hulk Gray episode that we did, because in that one, Bruce Banner is visiting a psychologist, and but in this one, the way it's represented is that Amadeus will be asleep and he will be having a dream that he's driving this convertible and he's having he's just so enjoying himself, and he'll glance in the rearview mirror and the Hulk's sitting there. So it's like the Hulk, he's in the driver's seat, but the Hulk is right behind him. And so that's the metaphor, or I don't even know if you can call it a metaphor since it is visual, and they, they get to play with it like in a visual way, like when the Hulk eventually takes over.
Is it like Jekyll and Hyde and League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, where he's sort of the shadow of the other person, is always kind of there talking to them? But
it's totally, because it's like he'll walk in a room past a mirror and the Hulk's face will be there, Yeah. but the whole play on this is Amadeus is saying, I know the mistakes that Banner made, and I'm not going to repeat them, and I have this under control. Mm-hmm. So, which of course is like, the most apparent irony ever. That's, that's the egotism of Tony Stark, right there, of like, yeah, sure, I invent massive weapons and artificial intelligences that can destroy the world, but I'm not a bad guy, so nothing bad will happen. No. But what is super hooked me is, so there's that opening scene on the beach. Maddie is telling Amadeus, like, turn into the Hulk out now. They got trouble on the beach. Go. And he's like, I've got to cram all these calories in my mouth. So he's eating all this junk food because he gets exhausted being the Hulk. Very Flash kind of thing there. But then
real quick, is the Hulk that he turns into also sort of out of control, or is it much more like Professor Hulk?
It's like Professor Hulk. So he can, and he like sort of snaps in and out at will. So he snaps in and fights this huge monster. Which is like a kaiju kind of thing that he's fighting. And then the story comes out that he and Maddie have been tracing these weird sort of monster eruptions around the globe. And so they will travel to that place, wait for the monster to come out. He will fight it. And once he knocks it out, he hits it with this little shrinking ray, and it becomes sort of rodent sized. So he can pick up these like, devastating little kaiju, and they drop them in these little, like, little chemistry set sort of chemistry, I guess is the wrong word, like biology sort of thing, where it's like a little terrarium for the monster. And so that's what they're doing. And then he very quickly thinks he is under attack by Lady Hellbender when she arrives on Earth, but it turns out she is doing the same thing. She's collecting these monsters from all over the universe to return to her dimension or planet. I don't quite remember exactly how it's put together, because she basically wants to set up like a zoo for them. So she is not shrinking them. She has this crazy huge spaceship, and she is just keeping these full-size monsters on board. So, monsters, a Hulk with a subtle Jekyll Hyde problem that's not like the focus of the book. I was like, this is totally the Hulk I want to see. This is the fun Hulk that I want to watch him beating up monsters and getting kind of, squished in between the fights and stuff. So yeah, I totally love that.
So let's recap. It is, do we ever learn how he can become, like how he got the Hulk ability?
So this is where it gets fuzzy, because I've read other little snippets like from Wikipedia and, on Amazon and stuff. And it was sort of like, as soon as I started to piece things together, I was like, oh, I don't even want to know. But, so I don't totally understand the events that preceded this, but I think that Amadeus Cho was already a figure sort of in the Marvel hero pantheon in some like super genius, boy genius way.
Okay.
And there are flashbacks in this book to a rescue operation that Hulk did where he absorbed all of this, and shit, I can't believe I forgot the name of it. He absorbed this different kind of radiation than gamma. So he went into this accident site, and Bruce like intentionally reabsorbed this other energy, but then that made all of his molecules unstable. So Tony Stark and T'Challa, and I'm sorry that I don't remember the third person, are all observing how this is affecting Bruce. And they've got him in this sort of containment unit. They're hoping he doesn't blow up. And Amadeus arrives on the scene and says, hey, I've got the answer here. It's blah, blah, blah. And they don't listen to him. So he ends up putting on his own little containment suit that's, he's modified in some way, and going out to Bruce. And what we learn in a really subtle way, I really liked how this was all done in the book. I thought it was great. There's a scene that I don't want to spoil, but just between like Banner's face and Amadeus's face. And you're like, oh man, I really love this back and forth they're having, this one-on-one. And then it ends right there. So it's not like that happens and then you have a Hulk-sized accident where he becomes Hulk. But I think we're meant to believe like that's the missing piece from whatever you knew about him on Battle World or whatever. But my thinking is that you don't need to know what happened in Secret Wars or Battle World or whatever. Like that's enough to kind of get the hint of like, oh shit, he went down and thought he was going to use this containment suit to fix Banner, and he ended up absorbing the radiation himself and becoming this different kind of Hulk.
It's interesting you bring this up. I've been pondering this for a little while now, in terms of how story handles characters. And when I say story, I could be meaning comics and graphic novels, but also TV, movies, etc. And it's like, we've had so many movies now that they have to, or TV shows. We have to tell you the origin story. We have to give it to you. It's just, we have to. And it's like, okay, for some things that's fine, but clearly for those things like Spider-Man, Batman, etc., we just, as a culture, don't need it for at least 100 years.
Yeah.
We got it. But then I thought about, Netflix's Jessica Jones doesn't give it to you right away. That is not the important question right out of the gate. It becomes the important question as time goes on. And I like that subversion of it. But I also was thinking about take one of my favorite characters, Dr. Frickin' Who. We never know what the Doctor is truly all about. He or she gives sort of glimpses like, he always kind of waves it off like, well, I ran away. I looked into the void and I ran away. I was too scared, blah, blah, blah. It's still never quite clear. And I hope part of me hopes they never address that, because I think once you do, it removes even more of the mystery from that character, especially after 50 years of sort of milking that particular angle. But just, how do you feel about stories in general handling, especially in comics? Like, should we be expecting more books to not delve into the origin story motif as much?
I would definitely appreciate that. My biggest fear with Spider-Man Homecoming was that they were going to show us a origin story.
Yeah.
And because I felt when I watched those Andrew Garfield, well, I only watched the first one. When I watched that, I was like, why are you even starting with this? We already know. Like, this is so dumb. You're wasting precious time.
Well, it's a weird one too. It's like his parents are in the CIA. You're like, that's okay. That's a new element.
And it's just so dumb. And I thought it was beautifully shot, but I don't understand why Zack Snyder told the Batman falling in the well story again. I think one of the very few. Well, granted, the Marvel solo movies have done a pretty good job on all the origin stories. I'll give them that. I do think I really enjoyed the Batman Begins version of Batman, where it's like he's piece by piece putting it together.
Yeah.
Rather than all at once. And I think Into the Spider-Verse did a really good job at that too.
Well, Batman Begins had to do that because it had to find a way
to
reintroduce that entire universe in a grounded, methodical way, piece by piece, to just remove itself from the Schumacher continuity. We just come off of like the most over the top where like stuff like the most impossible stuff was never explained.
Right.
Like,
right.
What do you do to draw a clear line in the sand? You say, oh, we're going to show you the most like practical stuff, but even show you how these things came into being. Like everything will have an explanation so that this is not that version of Batman. I just, I'm thinking about a Marvel movie. Like, let's say they had just dropped us into, I mean, you needed that for Iron Man. You had to have Tony Stark go through that transformation.
Yeah.
You had to have it for Captain America. I mean, you can't just jump in a Captain America movie and not say like, well, he was a skinny, kid with a lot of heart. You kind of, I mean, Thor, I guess, just is sort of Thor. So that sort of, I guess, worked. But then he had sort of a origin arc, I guess you could say. Like, well, here's the real Thor. He learned a lesson, and now this is who we'll come to know. I mean, I don't necessarily want a Black Widow origin story. I don't want a Hawkeye origin story. I kind of thought I wanted the Nick Fury origin, but not now that I got it. I'm like, I don't know if I want that. Like, I'd rather the whole knowing exactly where the eye comes from is not the most interesting part of Nick Fury anymore. Like, that's just all these little affectations kind of helped flesh out a life of subterfuge and mystery. And it's almost kind of like the Joker, where every time somebody asked him about the eye, he'd just tell a different story.
Yeah.
That would be kind of fun. So it's like, where I'm going with all this is I'm going to be really fascinated to see what the Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix does this fall. Is it something that, is knowing that you're having this slice of the Joker's background, does that enrich your appreciation of that and the Batman mythos at a greater level? Or does it give you information that you should never have had? Like, it's like, I'll never be able to look at the character again. I don't know. This all.
I can tell you what I think. No, I don't need to know the Joker's backstory at all.
I mean, this trailer looks so good, though. It popped up at Dark Phoenix. I'm like, man.
I don't know how a 50-year-old man is becoming the Joker, but
I mean, we're gonna find out. That's just it. It's like it's daring you to ask that question. Like, well, how's this gonna work?
Well, I think one of the cool things. So, Totally Awesome Hulk came out right at that same time where X-23 became Wolverine and Jane Foster became Thor and
Miles
A-Force came out. So, well, Miles had been around in the Ultimates universe for a while.
Oh, he had? I think there was a moment when
there was a moment when they merged it, and I'm fuzzy on that history, but it wasn't the 2016 all new, all different Marvel.
Okay.
But there was a very deliberate move that they made to diversify their characters in all ways, like from the creators up, down to like the ethnicities of the characters to the genders of the characters. And so the way those origins were handled, I think was done really well. Like, so Amadeus Cho, I guess if you had known Amadeus Cho before this into Secret Wars, like this might be exciting for you, but not knowing that, it's still cool. Like, that's fine. You don't really need to explain the Hulk. Like, it's sort of, he's been around for a long time. The Thor story with Jane Foster was interesting. The way they, sort of told that after the fact of her picking up the hammer, it became a mystery for Odinson to unravel. And then you learned more about the effects on Jane herself. And I thought those, to me, that's the way to do an origin story and not start from like babyhood of the of the character.
Yeah.
And like all, that would have been so tiresome when Marvel was trying to quickly just flip the scripts on all of their heroes. That would have taken too long. So this works really well, but that leads directly into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is why I think like issues 1 through 4 are Greg Pak and Frank Cho.
Okay.
Greg Pak writes the next 2 issues. And then there's a sort of bonus issue included, but Mike Choi takes over the art, and his art is great. It's wonderful, but it is not the comic booky, like cartoony, superhero-y, like fun art of Frank Cho. And the other problem is that then after that, the Lady Hellbender monster hunting story is done at the end of issue 4. And I was initially really hopeful for the next issue, because as you go into it, it has to do with the Enchantress, who's like from Asgard or something. And so there's some sort of cool, Jane Foster Thor crossover. At least these dwarves make this amazing weapon for Hulk, but it just never rises to that same sense of fun of him punching out monsters on the beach.
So this isn't like a trade where it's like, oh, volume 1 is one arc starts.
Classic, this is the classic
various issues, and here you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
The problem we've talked about, or at least I've talked about with several Marvel titles, is that they just have some, directive or mission to put together every single issue in order rather than keep arcs together. And, when there were titles that I collected, granted, they weren't Marvel titles, like when there were DC titles, like I wanted every issue of Catwoman, that I can't even remember, like Jim Ballant was doing the art for.
Okay.
I think they eventually released that. I think I have that on my shelf, but I didn't, but then, when it came to like specific stories, I just want the specific story. I don't need the DVD extras at the end. And there's definitely a thing about, well, I don't know. I would probably feel the same in print, because I was going to say it's a disappointment in digital, because you're looking down at that bar that just tells you how many pages you have left. And then you're like, wait a second, this has nothing to do with the other stuff. It's difficult to feel like, wow, I'm looking at this book and only half of it is something I want to read, or a little bit more than half, and yeah, so nothing against those creators. It's just a packaging problem. And that's all I wanted to say. I would totally endorse a teenage Hulk fighting monsters, after eating a bunch of hot dogs on the beach. And when that person becomes, I don't know, when the stakes are upped, or he becomes like, walking around with sort of gods, like Thor, that's when it goes kind of off the rails for me. Like, I just don't, this is not really the story I wanted to see. And it's not because he's interacting with other heroes, because She-Hulk, and I believe it's Miles as Spider-Man, show up in issues 1 through 4. And it's totally fun to see them talking to each other, because like, here are these 2 Hulks that aren't actually related, but they have this similar, origin point of Bruce Banner. And so, it's kind of a neat dynamic there. And Spider-Man is Spider-Man, like, being a fool, which is fun. But yeah, then after issue 4, it's just sort of, Have
you gone ahead to look at anything from volumes 2, 3, and beyond?
Nope. And I don't even know if they exist, actually. Do you?
I thought you'd offhandedly mentioned this was like volume 1 of something. Maybe.
Oh, there is actually a volume 2, because I have the page open in front of me, and a volume 3. The volume 2 is, it looks like, exclusively Civil War 2. So boo. And then volume 3, is called Big Apple Showdown. Maybe it's a return to form. They're all by Greg Pak. So that's some great consistency. I just don't, reading this digitally, like, when you can just sort of duck in and read those 4 issues, awesome, perfect, but it's not, and it's been so long now since the series actually came out, I don't know that you want to go hunt down all those other issues, but, yeah, that's kind of where I ended up.
Who'd you like better, Amadeus Cho or Bruce Banner by the time you were done?
Oh, for sure. Cho, or Chulk, as She-Hulk starts calling him. He is
really?
Yeah. I mean, it's just for the fun part. That Hulk Gray is still, one of my favorite books, and like such an awesome telling of the Jekyll Hyde problem of Hulk. But all these Hulks where it's like the immortal Hulk and the, totally invincible Hulk and a planet full of Hulks. And
be careful. Immortal Hulk's getting a lot of good press these days.
Yeah. I just don't, the interesting thing about Hulk is the instability,
Interesting you say that, because Endgame totally removed that instability from the equation. Like it's like, once he decided to become Professor Hulk, and he didn't have that struggle. He almost became background noise. It's like, oh yeah, Bruce, there's Banner. Yeah, they give him some jokes here and there, but like he's not nearly as interesting. You don't pay attention to him as much. I mean, but at the same time, I feel given the Marvel Universe's array of technology and geniuses, self-proclaimed geniuses around every corner.
Yeah.
All of this stuff, you'd think they could have developed a way, because based on some continuity, the Hulk situation is an extension of the super soldier serum. I know in other, in other situations, it's caused or driven via other things, but it's if you take the super soldier serum route, it's like, oh, we couldn't replicate it the way they could for Captain America. There's something went wrong. He becomes, Banner becomes the Hulk. Why can't they solve this? Like, you'd think that like the Professor Hulk solution would come about so much faster from forever now. Like, it just seems weird that they could publish any Hulk book where he's crazy. It's just, well, I say this because like the Cho removes that from the equation from the get-go. So it's like, okay, he's not going to have this like thing where at the end of volume 1, then he'll get his senses. It's like, and they just rehash Banner. It's like they just kind of drop you in. For me, it's at some point, I think the limitations of that character have always been, sort of predefined. Like at some point, it's just going to be boring.
Well, and so that's such a great point to bring up, because in the flashback where Cho is confronting Banner, who's absorbed all this radiation as the Hulk, and they've got him in this, Stark and T'Challa have him in this like containment unit underwater for some dumb reason. Their contingency plan is to blast him into the sun. So that's totally what the reasonable person in the room is saying.
Wow.
And Amadeus and I guess Stark to some extent is like trying to keep him around, like he's done so much good for humanity or whatever. And to me, like having Amadeus, like I like the way it was treated, but story-wise, like if this were real history, I guess, if they had blasted him into the sun, I would have been like, yep, that's exactly what you should have done. That's that's great. He's already done the thing where he saved humanity, absorbed all that radiation, but now he can't stay here as like a not even human-sized, but a Hulk-sized atomic bomb. Like, you've got to send him into a star.
See, I'm even hearing that though, and I'm just like, that just sounds it just sounds not boring so much as just it doesn't fit what that character could be. For me, the ultimate version of the Hulk was the Bill Bixby TV show, because he was like
on the run.
On the run, but like it's that, but it's also sort of Quantum Leap-esque, where it's like, look, I have this problem, this condition. Yeah. I'm going to try to channel it into as much good and help people as much as possible, but I can never stick around, because just as much as this gift can help people, it will always make it so that nobody will trust me, and I have to move on to the next time. So that is the struggle. Like that's the heart of it, is this guy who's got this almost kind of disease, and he's got to channel it in this productive way. I dream, and then we're never going to get it now, nor do I want it now. It's too late. But I dream of an alternate reality where we had 2 or 3 Mark Ruffalo, like mid 2000s movies, around maybe 2007, 8, around the time Iron Man 1 came out. We had 2 or 3 Mark Ruffalo movies that were exactly that. Him and you could play with genre. One of them could be more like a Western because he's sort of in this small town and, in New Mexico, and he's got to, fend it off from an invading drug lord or something. Like that could be one of them. Another one could be like you can do an international kind of thing. I mean, you could really play with that. And Mark Ruffalo would have crushed that when he was younger.
Oh yeah. I mean, think of is it in the first Avengers where Black Widow goes to get him out?
Yeah.
And, like that whole story right there is so great.
It's perfect.
Like, and it's just a little bit of it, but it's like you could have done a whole movie on this guy that, it opens up with him, fighting the Chitauri, and then the second act of it is him going out into the jungle to help people as a doctor because he's like, I can't do this. It's crazy. Yeah. It's going to destroy me.
Both that movie, the Ruffalo version of the character, and then the Bill Bixby version too, they both kind of treat it like it is Jekyll and Hyde. Like,
right. Yeah.
Ruffalo was the first actor to say like the other guy and refer to it like it is like other personality, where Ed Norton was more like he did treat it like a disease. Like, I got to cure my disease. I got to find a way to stop. Whereas Ruffalo's like he's come to terms with it. Bill Bixby's kind of the same way, where it's like, hey, this other, I've got a friend who's going to help out from time to time. So, and even I as a kid really liked that show, and it's still, I'll catch it every once in a while on streaming, and just, the effects haven't aged well, but the scripts are pretty strong. Like, you could take any number of those scripts and adapt those to a movie pretty easily, or at least a higher quality Disney Plus, Netflix kind of style show.
Yeah. I like the way you're picking apart this Ruffalo character, because you're right. They totally defanged Hulk in Endgame.
Yeah.
Like, once you see him with the glasses on, like, joking around in the diner, it's like, no, Thor's the funny one.
Yeah. They made him the depressing one. You're like, okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
This is a turn of phrase.
Yeah, Hulk was always scarier than everything. Even in Ragnarok, it's pretty scary when it's like, when he confesses like he didn't know how long he had been the Hulk. It's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
That's a serious problem, dude. So that's my recommendation. If you can borrow this, do it and read issues 1 through 4.
Fantastic. Well, I like this pick. I like that we do a big 2 pick every once in a while. We get really indie heavy. And so it's nice to kind of remind folks that, there are 2 big ass companies that you've heard of and know of their work. So there you go. We do a fair amount of DC stuff. I just don't feel like we do as much Marvel stuff as we
really. Oh, I've done a bunch recently.
I guess you have. Yeah, you're right.
Because when I looked down in my recommended if you like, it was all from that Marvel reboot of things I mentioned, the Mighty Thor when it was Jane Foster, and A-Force, and
you're right.
Unstoppable
Domino.
Wasp, and
Domino's not.
Yeah, Mockingbird, Domino, but all of those, I there's a Marvel feel to those that I think is cool. And I think I'll tell you what too is, I think 1 through 4 of this, you would ask a while ago, you and I had a conversation of what do you give to a sort of tween kid that likes the Marvel movies and wants to get into books? Issues 1 through 4, this would be great. Because it's like, he's fighting monsters, and it's like there's like kind of goofy jokes in it. Like, it's basically Hulk wearing board shorts, not ripped up jeans. And there's a moment where the ocean takes his shorts away, and so they have this funny beefcake kind of drawing of him covering up his Hulk junk. And kids would think that's funny. Kids would think that's really hilarious, and this would be good for that. It's never it never crosses the line into R-rated stuff. It's just fun.
Not Dr. Manhattan standing there just green.
Yeah, with a blue dick just hanging out. Yeah. No.
Which, by the way, real quick on that, I have completely given up on being at all interested in this Watchmen DC Rebirth thing. Jesus Christ. I don't know if anybody out there is reading it. I started to. And then it quickly turned into hate reading it.
Wait, reading it?
The Watchmen Rebirth thing that they've been doing the last year, where they're introducing Watchmen into the DC, Batman's investigating something, he goes to the Watchmen universe. It just reeks. It's everything Alan Moore warned us about, which is look, as soon as we start doing that, it's going to be just nothing but corporate indulgence.
It's so self-parroting.
It is the very definition of that shitty word synergy, where you're just they tout it as like a value add. You're like, no, all you're doing is taking things that should never go together, and just because you own them, you're saying, well, let's put them together and sell more.
Why are they not just making new heroes that are actually good? Like,
I don't know.
It's the joke about like on Star Trek where the the red shirts never have a name,
Yeah.
And you just know that they go to a planet and like they're dead. And in DC, it's like whenever someone has a stupid superhero name, you're like, well, you're not going to make it out of this book.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'll tell you back on the Watchmen though, I'll tell you I just recently rewatched Spotlight. And to me, the most shocking revelation in that is that Billy Crudup's penis is blue.
But oh God.
I couldn't write that really well because I was trying to do it in the moment. But
I will say, well, real quick, and massive spoilers. If you haven't read it and you care about this, you think you might pick it up, like maybe pause right here.
Yeah.
Because this is sort of a big spoiler. And I
for Watchmen?
For the Watchmen Rebirth series that's going on right now. So where it just officially finally lost me was when Dr. Manhattan appears on the moon to both Metron and the new guy who's the new Metron who's in the Mobius chair. Forget who that is, like Owlman or something, but not Night Owl from the Watchmen verse, but like just Owlman. And Metron's teaching him how to use the Mobius chair, and Dr. Manhattan appears and just ices them both. I'm like, okay, so how strong is he? Like, what are you suggesting, that this guy is literally stronger than Darkseid in any reality? So he is like, that was never the case in the Watchmen universe. Like there was,
really? Well, that's interesting. I don't know who Metron and the Mobius chair or whatever you mentioned are. So
what? Oh my God, dude!
Yeah.
This proves that I am more of a DC person, I think, and you might be more of a Marvel. I mean, you're clearly more of a Marvel person than I am. But that's
interesting because I've always felt like I was a DC person, but I think you're right.
I fall into that DC canon hardcore though. Like I look at a Marvel event book, like a series, like where you have to buy 10 issues of interrelated things to make it all fit together. Like I look at that and I'm just like, no, I don't want no. Yeah. And yet in the same breath, I'll pick up the Darkest Night Green Lantern like super art and read every interdependent thing because I'm like, ooh, look at this, ooh, and then this, and and it's not for any reason other than I feel like the mythology of the DC universe is just so much more into it fits my aesthetic more than I think the Marvel one does in comics at this time.
Yeah,
Vision, but single things like the Vision sort of,
that's interesting because I think I duck into DC for single things. But that'll be we should now track that now that we're aware of it. And I did want to add one other note is that I realized just a moment ago where I got Totally Awesome Hulk. It looks like it is still available on Prime Reading. So if you want to check it out and you're a Prime member, you should be able to just download it to your Kindle app and read it for free. Like it's not that paid Kindle Unlimited thing. It's Prime Reading. So but that's all I got
that right now. Great. Well, if you like this, check out our other episodes. We've got 100 and then some.
This is 119.
Ooh, 119. Wow, man, we're just racking them up. We talk about a lot of books. Some we'll be revisiting as we have with the recent Multiversity episode. If you like the show, subscribe, search for Panelism wherever you find podcasts, and subscribe and tell your friends and tell us what you think. You can leave comments in our Instagram account, which is panelism.inc on Instagram. That's panelism.ink. And finally, we have a website, which is also panelism.ink. That is the extension, not .com, just .ink. That's where all the stuff is. It gets to be a mouthful every time, but man, it's all there. It's all there for you.
Excellent. Well, thanks for doing this episode that we touched on so much. We thought we had a short, concise episode on one book, and we hit on a lot. That was cool. The curiosity got the better of me. There we go. That's what it is. No. We also Dark Phoenix, Hulk movies. Man, that was great. Bill Bixby. I believe the Hulk's name in that was David Banner, not Bruce.
You're right. No, you're absolutely right.
Crazy.
That always confused me as a kid. I'm like, wait, is he a brother of Bruce Banner? I think they just changed it for the show just because they could.
I wonder, or if it was like their star's name was already alliterative. BB.
Yeah. Interesting.
Bill Bixby as Bruce Banner.
That was the 80s. A lot of weird decisions just happened. Some guy with a cigar somewhere. I don't like that name. Call him David.
I'm sure. He had a name right out of Stan Lee's, imagination.
Yeah, really.
Bill Bixby. I'm just gonna fade out on all this chatter. We'll just.
That is it. The Ruffalo Hulk is the once he appeared, I'm like, oh, it's kind of one of the joys of that first Avengers movie. You're like, oh no God, kidding. This is what it should have been this whole time. Like because I truly did like that show growing up as a kid. I'm just like, I dig,
me too.
And it was less.
Never eat Triscuits before a podcast. Sounds like a good warm-up phrase.
I was gonna say it sounds like the again those things that Will Ferrell would say at the beginning of Anchorman.
The Human Torch was denied a bank loan.
Yeah.